You are standing in a forest, and it is getting dark. There is no flashlight in your pocket, no matches, no memory of a lighter ever existing. Just cooling air, moving shadows, and a body that is not built for the night. For most of human history, this was not a thought experiment. This was Tuesday. Most people imagine early humans huddled around a campfire from the very beginning, flames crackling, shadows dancing on cave walls, warmth as a given. It is the image every documentary reaches for. It is comforting. It is also wrong for a period of time far longer than the one we usually picture. Fire, as a controlled, everyday tool, arrived late. Evidence of habitual, daily fire use only becomes widespread in the archaeological record roughly 400,000 years ago. But the human lineage stretches back over 2 million years before that point. For over 1.5 million years, something that would become us walked the earth, through cold nights and colder winters, without dependable flame. That means the true survival story of our species is not a story about fire. It is a story about everything that came before it. The body itself was the first technology. Consider what a human being actually is, stripped of tools. A mostly hairless primate, slow compared to nearly every predator nearby, with soft skin, blunt nails, and no natural weapon sharper than a fist. On paper, this is not a creature built to survive an African night, let alone an Ice Age one. And yet it did. Not through strength, through something stranger, through sweat. Humans are among the most efficient long-distance coolers in the animal kingdom. Where a lion overheats after a short explosive chase, a human, walking steadily under a punishing sun, can keep going. Researchers studying persistence hunting, the practice of tracking an animal for hours until it collapses from heat exhaustion, describes something almost eerie about it. The predator does not need speed. It needs patience and a body that refuses to give out. This changes the picture entirely. Before fire, before spears, before shelter, endurance was already a weapon. But endurance alone does not explain a species surviving the coldest millennia the planet has produced. Cold does something specific to the human mind. It does not just threaten the body, it reorganizes behavior. Without fire for warmth, early humans could not simply wait out the cold. They had to outthink it. Archaeological sites in regions with brutal winters show something telling. Deliberate use of caves and rock shelters, not as permanent homes, but as calculated seasonal retreats, positioned to catch sunlight, to block wind, to trap what little ambient warmth existed. This is not shelter as convenience. This is shelter as strategy, chosen with an awareness that would not look out of place in a modern engineering decision. And there is a detail that unsettles many people once they hear it. Some of the earliest deliberate use of insulation may not have come from fire at all, but from something far more intimate, bodies pressed together. Group huddling, likely accompanied by early forms of clothing made from hides, scraped and shaped by hand. Warmth, in other words, was often social before it was chemical. This detail matters more than it seems. It suggests that surviving without fire did not just shape behavior. It shaped relationships. It shaped trust. A human alone in the cold, without flame, needed other humans nearby, not as company, but as infrastructure. Here is where the common belief collapses further. Most people assume raw meat was simply eaten as is, chewed and swallowed the way we imagine a wolf might do it. That is not quite accurate either. Early hominins developed something almost overlooked in popular retellings: mechanical food processing, pounding meat with stone tools to break down fibers, slicing it into thinner cuts to make chewing and digestion easier. Some researchers argue that this kind of preparation, not cooking but processing, may have offered nutritional advantages long before fire entered the picture, effectively acting as a primitive predecessor to what cooking would later achieve chemically. The knife, in a sense, came before the flame. This detail forces an uncomfortable realization. Much of what fire is credited for, softer food, easier digestion, more available calories, was already being partially solved by hands and stone long before anyone controlled combustion. Fire did not invent human ingenuity, it inherited it. There is a deeper layer here, one that goes beyond tools and shelter, a psychological one. Living without fire meant living without a guaranteed boundary against the dark. No flame to push back the night, no light to reveal what moved beyond the tree line. This should have been a source of constant, paralyzing fear. And yet, the fossil and behavioral record suggests something different. Increasingly coordinated group behavior, cooperative vigilance, and what some anthropologists describe as distributed alertness. Groups arranging themselves so that awareness of danger never rested on one individual alone. In other words, before fire could stand guard, people stood guard for each other. This is worth sitting with. The absence of fire may have accelerated something fire would later be credited for symbolically, the sense of a protected circle, a boundary between safety and threat. Except this boundary was not made of flame. It was made of vigilance, proximity, and trust between individuals who could not afford to sleep carelessly. Safety, before it was ever a fire pit, was a network of watching eyes. Scale this outward, and the pattern becomes larger than any one behavior. What we are describing is not a species patching together survival through isolated tricks, persistence hunting here, shelter placement there, meat processing elsewhere. We are describing a species whose defining trait was never a single adaptation, but the coordination of many imperfect ones. No claws, compensated by tools. No natural insulation, compensated by shelter and clothing. No overwhelming strength, compensated by endurance and cooperation. No fire, compensated by nearly everything else. This reframes the entire narrative of human evolution. We tend to search for the one invention that made us who we are: fire, language, agriculture, but the period before fire suggests something quieter and more unsettling. Survival itself was the invention. Improvisation, sustained across 1.5 million years, was the actual technology. And this raises a question that is easy to avoid, but hard to ignore once it surfaces. If fire was not the thing that saved us, if it arrived after so much of the hardest survival work was already done, then what does that say about the story we tell ourselves about progress? We like to imagine turning points. A single moment where everything changed. A spark, quite literally, that separated the primitive from the modern. But the deeper record suggests transformation rarely works that way. It suggests that the qualities we associate with fire, safety, warmth, control over the environment, were being built slowly, painfully, and socially, long before any flame existed to take credit for them. Fire did not create human resilience. Human resilience simply outlived the darkness long enough to eventually meet it. Somewhere, in a cold and lightless night, hundreds of thousands of years ago, a group of early humans sat pressed together, listening for movement in the dark, trusting bodies they could not fully see to keep them alive until morning. They had no flame to protect them. They only had each other. And that, it turns out, may have been enough. Like and subscribe. See you in the next.